Hello and welcome to week 7 of our little videos here in the summer term. Nearly at the end of term, but we're going to continue all the way through and we'll see how you guys get on at the end. We'll have an enormous arsenal of all these videos and all the topics within. Right, today we're going to do bits and pieces on stalemate. Now I know a lot of you have accidentally done some stalemates in your games. Don't worry, that is why I am here this week, to tell you how to avoid them, but also later on we're going to do some little bits and pieces on how to get a stalemate yourself. Now stalemate isn't always a bad thing. If you're behind on material, if you're losing a game, stalemate is a draw and that's a good result. So we're going to look at it from both sides here. Now all of you should know what we do in this position. How do we start our queen against king? Yes, that's right. We put the queen a knight's move away from the king. That means that, we are in a good spot to start pushing this king towards the corner. This is what we're going to do. We've created this box here. This king can never go in any of these arrows here. We have cut off the king. And then all we do to force the king into the corner is follow it. King goes one square down here. We do the same. King goes one up. We do the same. And so on and so forth until the king gets in to the corner. Now this is a little trick here by black, because can you see what will happen if the queen continues to follow the king? Yes, that's right. This would be a stalemate, and this is not what we want. We want to continue to get this king in the corner, but we don't want to trap it completely without it being check. This king cannot go to this square because of the queen. Can't go to g7 again because of the queen, and it can't go to h7 because of the queen. But black's got to make a move, right? And is the queen actually checking the king? Do queens move like knights? I'm afraid they don't. And this is what's called stalemate, where one side cannot move, like the king can't here, but they're also not in check. If it was check and the king couldn't move, that would be checkmate and you would win the game. However, this one is a draw. Stalemate is a draw, and it's something we want to avoid. Can you see a better move here for white that would continue to restrict the king but not put it in checkmate? There's plenty of decent moves here. What we're looking for is ones that stop the king going to this square basically, but without it also being stalemate. If you said queen to f7, I'm afraid you also did a stalemate. Exactly the same thing, where the king unfortunately is not in check but can't go to any of these squares either. What we were looking for was one of these three moves, probably either queen to d7, and then the king's got a couple of options later on. Queen to g4, the same thing, cuts off the king, also cuts off this square. King would then have 3 squares to choose from later on. But the better one, the best move on the board here, is queen to g5. And the idea of that is that you're cutting off there, you're cutting off here, but you're leaving the h7 square free for this king to continue, and it's just going to go like this all day long. One of these 2 squares, and then you can bring in your king and do a checkmate. So that's what stalemate is, and here we're going to look at it from another point of view, where unfortunately if you are white here, you are in big trouble. You're a pawn down, but the problem is this pawn is coming down the board and there is not a lot you can do if you decide to come this way with your king. Not a lot that will happen. Something like king e1, a4, you keep trying to come after this pawn. You can actually catch this pawn If the pawn comes here, your king would come here and get it, but unfortunately you're leaving all of these to the mercy of the black king, which is going to come gobble, 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 and it's going to gobble all those up, hoover these pawns up, and you are in big trouble here as white, and there is nothing you can do now about this pawn coming down to become a queen, and then black can do the checkmate that we've just looked at. So that isn't going to work as a strategy here. We can't go after this pawn. But what I'd like you to do here is pause your video, and based on what we're talking about this week, I'd like you to try to find a way for white to draw this game. So take your time, pause your video. Okay, well this wasn't easy, but what we're trying to do here is trying to self-stalemate. We're trying to stalemate our own king, force that happening. So if you hadn't quite got there, just have another pause and see if you can find a way of doing it. If you'd already seen it, then you can carry on. So we need to cocoon our own king such that it can't move, and there's nothing that black can do about it. So what would the first move be, do you think? Yes, look at what happens here. All of these pawns are blocked in. They can't do anything. So it's really, what happens to happen is these two pieces, the king and the pawn, you have to make it so that they can't move, with it being white to move. That way it would be stalemate if you're also not in check. And the way to do that is to play this amazing move, king to g2. We're going to go the other direction from where this pawn is. We're not going to try and get this pawn. We're instead going to try and trap our own king and get a draw. Look what happens. a4, king h3. Do you see what we're doing yet? a3, king h4, a2. And now both of these pieces can still move. But there's a way of doing it so that in one move you can make sure that neither of these pieces can ever move again. And yeah, that is the move, pawn to h3. This pawn cannot go any further, and this king is completely stuck. It can't obviously take either of its own pawns, so forget that. And all of these squares are covered by black pawns. So black, even if they get a queen here, this is stalemate, and there's actually nothing that black can do here. None of these pawns can move, and it doesn't matter if they get the queen, because white cannot move, and this is stalemate, and it's a really cool little trick. And it's just in time as well, right? Because can you see what black would have done if it was black to move? Yeah, black would have had two separate checkmates if it was them to move. They could have gone to e1 with a nasty checkmate here, or they could have come to f6 looking this way with a different checkmate. So white got there just in time. If you saw that, well done. And so yeah, this is a good example of how not to try to get checkmate. Don't let your opponent get stalemate. But equally, if you're behind on material, if you can, especially if you only have your king, don't give up. You can try to get a stalemate of your own. Your opponent may not be wise to these ideas. So yeah, there you go. There's your week 7 video. Keep playing.